This TikTok influencer and manager just had his luxury party mansion raided after prosecutors say he was actually at the center of some alleged horrific crimes.
The man accused of running an OnlyFans operation out of a Bellevue mansion now faces 4 counts of human trafficking, money laundering, and leading organized crime. Exclusive video obtained by King 5 from last month shows one of dozens of parties inside the Bellevue mansion.
So meet Nikita Tiukalo, a 22-year-old from Seattle who, until recently, looked like every other self-proclaimed entrepreneur on social media. Honestly, he kind of looked like one of those Miami bros, with his Instagram being filled with, luxury cars, stacks of cash, expensive watches, and his captions about making millions of dollars. And his bio even bragged about making $14 million in profit by 20, along with, private equity in sales. But by the time this story blew up, though, most of those Instagram posts had disappeared. But thankfully, what hadn't disappeared was his Threads account. So over there was still plenty of posts showing off the same lifestyle: flashy cars, expensive restaurants, parties, and the kind of content that basically social media's version of saying, "Trust me, bro, I'm rich." Essentially, LARPing. But I guess the only thing he was LARPing was where the source of the finances were from, because he definitely had money. The only problem is that money is from awful places. Because according to prosecutors, that image was not telling the whole story. And instead of, becoming known as the next big entrepreneur, Tiukalo is now sitting in King County Jail after being charged with 4 counts of second-degree human trafficking, 1 count of money laundering, and 1 count of leading organized crime. And currently, he's pleaded not guilty to every charge. And obviously, since this case is still ongoing, these are allegations that prosecutors will have to prove in court. Now, here is the crazy part, because police weren't originally investigating some massive criminal enterprise. They were responding to what looked like a neighborhood situation. So for months, people living near this luxury rental mansion in Bellevue kept calling the police about these huge weekend parties. And we're talking about over 100 complaints and 911 calls. And neighbors described crowds of hundreds of people showing up, many of them reportedly underage, with loud music, traffic clogging the streets, and complete chaos in every weekend. And if you don't know too much about Bellevue, Bellevue is a quieter, rich suburb outside of Seattle. But I guess at first glance, it sounded like another influencer party house where everyone is trying way too hard to convince Instagram that they're living like, music stars. But according to investigators, those parties were only the beginning, because according to court documents, multiple women came forward and described nearly the same story. So prosecutors say that Tiukalo and others presented themselves as managers running a successful TikTok and OF agency. And this pitch was essentially they would handle all the marketing, messaging, and business side of things for the creators, and all the creators had to do was focus on making the content. The TikTok content, which is essentially the top of funnel, and the OF content, which is what they could really monetize and sell. And I guess in return, women were promised that they could make anywhere from $8,000 to $18,000 a month. And for someone who's just turned 18 or is about to, that is a pretty tempting offer, unfortunately. So investigators say that some of these women were first contacted when they were still 17 years old, and they were encouraged to start creating content as soon as they turned 18. One woman told detectives that she believed she would mostly be taking bikini photos and doing light modeling. Another said Tiukalo claimed that he'd changed other women's lives, flying them on private jets and helping them make more money than they'd ever imagined. Essentially, he was selling the dream. So obviously, he had this image of a young millionaire who cracked the code, and he was wanting to bring other people along for the ride. But prosecutors say that once the women agreed to join, that dream really started falling apart. So one of the first things that happened was the women's online accounts stopped being their own. Investigators say that the women were asked to verify their identities so OF and other platforms can actually approve of their creator accounts, but they didn't have access to those accounts. So the women were locked out of their accounts and the payments were going to the dudes running it. And that also meant that they couldn't see how much money was actually coming in, and they couldn't respond to subscribers, and they couldn't even access their own earnings without someone else's permission. So again, guys, number one, massive heads up, if you're a woman out there, don't sign to one of these creepy OF managers, that's for sure. And number two, if you're a dude out there thinking that you're messaging some lady on on OF, that's not happening, bro. You're messaging some dude sitting in there, and he's probably analyzed all the human psychology to give you the most tempting response to keep paying more money. After looking into this story, it seems like they literally treat the women they sign as cattle, and they treat any dude who pays for this as pay pigs. Why would anyone ever want to be a part of this cycle? But one woman later told detectives that she discovered that an account in her name had generated nearly $230,000 in gross revenue, but she said she never saw anything close to that amount. And several women also told investigators that they've been promised thousands and thousands of dollars a month, but instead were paid around $1,000 a month while the operation brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars. But then on June 4th, everything just came crashing down. So a Bellevue SWAT team executed a search warrant at the mansion, and what investigators say they found inside was quite shocking. This was definitely not just another influencer house, because police reported seizing more than 300 cell phones, over 50 laptops, financial records, notebooks tracking earnings, and a giant whiteboard labeled content plan. They also impounded several luxury vehicles parked outside, including a McLaren that had become, I guess, a part of Tucalo's image online. But regardless, to neighbors, it looked like just like a mansion where people were just partying way too much every weekend. But to investigators, prosecutors at least say that it looked like a headquarters of a highly organized operation. But according to prosecutors, again, the most disturbing part in this case isn't the money. It's what they say happened when the women wanted to leave. So court documents describe an environment where fear allegedly became the way the operation was run. So several women told detectives that they felt trapped. They were essentially warned that if they walked away, they could be sued for breaking their contracts. And others said that they were terrified that explicit content they had created would be released or used against them if they refused to keep working. But unfortunately, that's only the start of it, because the allegations became even more serious from there. So according to charging documents, multiple women described physical violence and intimidation. One woman told detectives there were what she described as massive firearms throughout one of the homes connected to the investigation. And prosecutors also alleged that women were slapped, dragged by their hair, and threatened when they did not do what was demanded of them. And there are also other things in court documents that I'm really not sure how to say on this channel without getting this video completely demonetized, but they involve a lot of forced humiliation and more firearms, and honestly, it's all just disgusting. And the women here were expected to work exhausting hours, sometimes live streaming and filming content for 12 plus hours a day. Like, this is just crazy. One woman also told detectives that a certain substance was handed out like it was candy to keep people awake. So I guess this is through marathon streaming sessions. And again, these are allegations laid out in the charging documents, and Tucalo has pleaded not guilty. So it'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out in court. But if prosecutors can prove them, this case goes way beyond just a dispute over some money. But I guess if you're wondering why this allegedly went on for so long without anyone stopping it, the answer is police actually started looking into Tucalo more than a year before his arrest. So newly released records show that Kirkland Police Department opened a separate investigation back in March of 2025 after 3 people walked into the police station and reported what they described as trafficking and extortion connected to Tucalo.
A man accused of running a human trafficking ring out of Bellevue had people reporting him to Kirkland police more than a year ago, but an investigation into those claims falling short of an arrest. And now the question is why?
Well, Kirkland police say they started investigating Tucalo in 2025 when he lived at this apartment complex. That case stalled out. A year later, though, he's in jail on similar charges with bail set at $5 million. Part of the reason for that high bail amount were allegations of witness tampering outlined in these Kirkland police reports.
And Kirkland, by the way, is the suburb directly north of Bellevue, so all of this is kind of going on in the same area. And the people who came forward said a large man had been sent to their homes demanding money after falling out with Tucalo. They also reported seeing what they described as violence against one of the women working for him. So investigators even contacted the parents of some of these women who were deeply worried about what their daughters were up to. But here is where this case gets really complicated, because according to police records, when detectives spoke with the young women, they reportedly said that their parents' concerns were not needed. Some of them even claimed their parents were harassing them and discussed getting restraining orders against them. So as the investigation continued, officers wrote that they had a hard time getting witnesses to work with them. But eventually, one detective closed the investigation with a simple note: case closed due to the lack of victim cooperation. So I guess looking back now, that line hits a little bit differently, because prosecutors say that's one of the biggest challenges in human trafficking cases. People who are being controlled through fear, manipulation, financial dependence, or threats often just don't immediately see themselves as victims, or they're just simply too afraid to speak up. And according to the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, that's one of the big reasons these investigations can take so long to get any form of result or a criminal charge. Because fast forward to the end of June, and Tucalo, he was back in court trying to get his $5 million bail reduced to $100,000. His attorney attorneys were arguing that he wasn't this wealthy businessman that prosecutors had made him out to be. They told the judge his assets had been seized and that he lost what money he had left to credit card fraud. Then they followed that by saying the whole case was just being exaggerated. In fact, his attorney argued that the allegations were essentially nothing more than wage theft. So while he's posting luxury cars, his argument in court is, well, I can't afford this because someone took all my stuff. Okay, this will be interesting to see how it all plays out in court, but prosecutors argued that releasing Tukalo would put the alleged victims at risk and pointed out to what they described as a history of witness tampering. Also, while sitting in jail, Tukalo made phone calls in Russian, instructing loved ones to move hundreds of thousands of dollars out of his bank accounts. So again, that's not looking good for him. And one prosecutor even told the judge, Mr. Tukalo may believe that because he speaks Russian, that we don't know what he's saying on the calls. So apparently we just have a giga brain over here. But after hearing arguments from both sides, the judge denied the request to lower Tukalo's bond, leaving the $5 million bail and all the existing conditions in place. But the most powerful moment of the hearing didn't come from either of the attorneys. It came from one of the alleged victims, who spoke publicly for the first time. She told the court, I will never forget looking at someone I loved and hearing him tell me if I ever spoke out about what I had been through and if I ever opened my mouth, he would take my life because I knew too much. She also described watching what she says happen over time, in quotes saying, I watched manipulation become normal. I watched violence become normal. I watched controlling women become normal. So overall, I mean, everything about this case is just horrifying. So whether or not a jury convicts Tukalo, those statements help explain something that we've talked about throughout this video. People often ask why victims don't just leave or why they don't immediately go to the police. Obviously, fear, threats, financial control, and emotional manipulation come into play here. But as of right now, Nikita Tukalo has pleaded not guilty for 4 counts of second-degree human trafficking, 1 count of money laundering, and 1 count of leading organized crime. If he's convicted, he's currently facing decades in prison, with some reports noting that the organized crime charges carries the possibility of a life sentence under Washington law. And as of right now, his criminal case is still moving through the courts, so the allegations remain just that, allegations as of now. Obviously, every OF management agency isn't doing something illegal, but there's definitely a lot of sketchy ones out there, so be careful, guys. Currently, his next hearing is on July 21st, and that'll reveal a whole lot more evidence. So I'll definitely be looking out for that date. Until then, if you're new here, feel free to subscribe, drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Peace.